Hi, everyone. My name is Rolddy Leyva, and I'm Managing Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, or what we call DIB here at Capital One. At Capital One, we remain dedicated to fostering an inclusive workplace for all associates. The commitment to our people, this isn't new for us. In fact, it dates back to our founding, and it's deeply embedded in our values. And it's certainly true with regards to our commitment to LGBTQ plus inclusion, especially as we observe LGBTQ plus Pride Month this June. Dating back to 1997, in fact, our domestic partners and same-sex spouses have been eligible for fertility, surrogacy, and adoption assistance. And beyond our walls, we support policy efforts like the Equality Act to advance critical protections and equality for the LGBTQ plus community. We believe it's our responsibility to continuously advocate for an equitable and inclusive society where everyone feels empowered to be themselves and has the opportunity to thrive. And it's in that spirit, then, that it is my pleasure to talk today with Senator Sarah McBride, who represents the 1st State Senate District of Delaware. And so, Sarah, thank you for being with us here today. And I'd love it if you could just maybe take a second to tell us a bit about yourself and how your journey led you into politics.
Sure. Well, first off, it's great to join you and to join Capital One on the Hill for this conversation. In many ways, my journey to politics is rooted in my own journey to authenticity. I've known who I am for as long as I can remember. I didn't know that there were other people like me. I didn't necessarily know that there was anything I could do about it, but from an early an age as possible, I remember lying in my bed at night praying that I would wake up the next day and be myself, that my family would be proud of me, that my friends would still be my friends, and that I could still make a difference in my community. Because at a young age, even before realizing that I wasn't alone, that there was something I could do about this, I was becoming very aware of the fact that I was living in a world that wasn't necessarily built to embrace and accept someone like me. And growing up, as I began to understand who I am, and as I learned that I'm not alone, I saw very clearly that there was still discrimination, violence, and significant prejudice facing the LGBTQ community. And as a young person, I feared that my dreams and my identity, my dreams of finding love, of living in a community I love and doing work that I love, were mutually exclusive with my identity as a transgender person. And I, at a young age, wanted to be an architect. And I used to read books about different buildings, and I stumbled across some books about the White House and the Capitol. And in reading those books, it wasn't the buildings or the structures that I found to be moving, but rather the stories that occurred inside of their walls, the stories that contained a simple through line, which was the story of advocates, activists, and a handful of courageous elected officials working together to expand equality and justice for more people, to deepen our understanding of the first 3 words in our Constitution, we the people. And I found hope in those stories. I found hope in the fact that if we had done it before, if we had transformed seemingly impossible change into a reality by bringing people from the shadows and the margins into our circle of opportunity, that if we had done that before, then we could do it again. And what became clear was that politics and government was the place where every avenue of society converges and where you can make the most amount of change for the most number of people in the most number of ways possible. And so I got involved in politics and advocacy and government, first wondering that if perhaps I helped to bring about change and to build a world where more people could live openly and authentically, that could help compensate for me living a life in the closet. And then eventually, when I came out, wanting to build a world where the positive experiences that I had were no longer a privilege for the few, but a right guaranteed to everyone, no matter their gender identity or their sexual orientation. And so I got involved in advocacy, and then eventually ran for public office. But I think more than my own journey as a trans person, the experience for me that informed both my advocacy and now informs me as an elected official was the experience with my husband, Andy, coming to this work and coming to this effort, not just as a trans person, but someone who's loved someone who's trans. I met Andy, who was a transgender man fighting for equality. He was about 3 years older than me. And about a year or so into our relationship, he was diagnosed with cancer. He was lucky enough to have insurance. We were lucky enough to have a job that allowed both of us to focus on his health. He got a clean bill of health and then received the news that his cancer was terminal. And after we were able to get married. Just 4 days after that, he passed away. And for me, that experience changed me in really profound ways. Andy taught me how to love and be loved. He taught me how to live the values I fight for at work in my own life. But more than anything else, my relationship with him underscored for me that change cannot come fast enough, that every time we ask LGBTQ people to sit back and allow for a slow conversation to take place before we treat them with dignity and ensure them opportunity, we are asking people to watch their one life pass by without the respect and fairness that everyone deserves. And so with that sense of urgency, with the deep desire to bring about change that allowed me to face the hardship and the challenges of coming out, of facing Andy's illness, and also with a profound sense of optimism and hope that I think we as a community have seen over the last decade, and certainly since the Stonewall Uprising in 1969, with that sense of hope, that sense of urgency, I decided to run for office. And now I'm incredibly lucky to have the opportunity to serve the district that I was born and raised in as a state senator.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing so openly of your story and for sharing Andy's story. And I'm sorry for your loss. And so much of what you shared really resonated with me, because it is at the heart of why we do this work. In fact, it's why we added the word belonging to this work. And as the head of this function at Capital One, we know that building diverse and inclusive teams is a priority. Representation matters. But the North Star really is about belonging. It's about everyone feeling safe and seen and heard and valued and able to thrive as their best, most authentic selves. You never really belong if you feel as though if you make conscious decisions about who you choose to be in the workplace or in your environment because you don't feel safe living your true self. And so that's why that's so important for us. We all identify across a range of identities. I, for instance, identify as Latino, as Cuban, as white, cisgender male, openly gay, among a number of others. And I can remember different times that I covered or code switched or concealed or hid on some or even the intersection of many of those identities, which is why I do the work today to help others and to advocate so that others don't have to. So I guess my question to you now is that as you reflect on your own range of identities, and particularly reflecting on the intersection between them and your role as an elected official, how would you characterize what belonging means to you? And how do you think that public policy can serve as a lever for helping more people feel a sense of belonging?
I think belonging is one of the most profound, not just needs, but desires and that we have as people. I think it's one of the most fundamental human emotions that we have, is that desire to be seen, to be loved, and to find community. You know, one of the challenges we have in the conversation around trans rights that's different than conversations around sexual orientation is that most people who are straight can understand what it feels like to love and to love and to lust. And so they're able to enter into conversations around sexual orientation with an analogous experience. And one of the challenges we face when we're talking about trans rights is that most people who are cisgender, who are not transgender, do not have a similar experience to being trans and in the closet. And your comment about belonging, I think, in many ways touches on what I always have described as what it felt like to be in the closet, which was a constant feeling of homesickness, an unwavering ache in the pit of my stomach that would only go away when I could be seen and affirmed as myself. And in many ways, our fight for equality mirrors our own journey to authenticity, to coming out, because as we finally achieve that sense of home in ourselves, we then seek to fight for a sense of home in our world and our communities. Ultimately, that's what the fight for equality is about, to be able to find home, to be able to find a place of peace and security, of fellowship, of love, of comfort in our world, in our workplaces, in our schools, in our families, in our homes, in our neighborhoods. And so I think, to me, in many ways, that sense of belonging is about alleviating that sense of homesickness, of finding place in ourselves and finding place in our world. And I think when we are able to achieve that, it's not just government. Legal equality is not the end of the road. It doesn't transform automatically in totality into lived equality, but government can set a foundation. Government can create policies that help to facilitate a sense of belonging, that can help to facilitate a sense of safety and security, that sense of home. And they can send a message. When our laws include an individual, when they include a community, it sends a message not just to that community, but to the country writ large, to the state writ large, to the city writ large, that this community is part of the fabric of our humanity, the fabric of our community, and part of our diversity. And that message can be life affirming, can be life changing, and in some cases can be life saving. We can't eliminate all pain or all loss as elected officials, but what we can do is we can make life a little bit easier for people when hard times hit. Part of that is ensuring that people can feel that sense of belonging, can feel that sense of home, so that no matter what challenges they face in their society, they know that they have a community, a family, whether chosen or blood, behind them, supporting them, helping to protect them.
Indeed. And one of the things I love so much about belonging is that it's universal. It's in our humanity. We all know a time when we have felt as though we belonged and when we haven't. And we should all be advocating for people to be able to belong. That it's at the heart of the work that we do. And so just, thank you for your work and for your advocacy in that space. Shifting gears just a little bit, reflecting on last year. 2020 was an extraordinary year on a number of fronts. Our nation grappled with issues like systemic racism and inequality, unlike any other time, certainly in my lifetime that I can remember. How would you perceive the role of government to lead more equitable outcomes for all diverse and underrepresented groups, inclusive of the LGBTQ+ community?
One of my favorite quotes, and frankly, one of the quotes that to me is part of my governing philosophy, is the quote by Audre Lorde, which is that there's no such thing as a single issue cause because no one lives single issue lives. I think there are a few issues that encapsulate that more than actually addressing the epidemic facing Black transgender women who live at the intersection of transphobia, latent homophobia, misogyny, and systemic racism. Their lives, their experiences, and the epidemic that they face reinforce that in the fight for equality, we can't just begin and end with policies like non-discrimination protections or marriage equality. That it's got to include meaningful economic empowerment programs, putting money and funding behind the types of programs that are connecting trans people with jobs. It means reforming the criminal justice system to repair trust and ensure that it is able to uphold the dignity and protect the safety of everyone in our community. Because right now, the violence that trans women of color are facing, it's not just based in hate in people's hearts, it's also based in hate that exists throughout society and in many cases in our laws. Because what is happening right now is that transgender people, particularly Black transgender women, are being pushed out of stable employment, stable housing, onto the streets, into underground economies, and out of society's traditional mechanisms for safety and security. And the only way to address that, the only way to create true lived equality for everyone in our community is to recognize that Audre Lorde quote, that we need to meet our progress on non-discrimination policies and marriage equality with progress on a whole host of issues, because all of those issues at the end of the day intersect with the LGBTQ community. And I do believe that government has not just a unique responsibility, but a unique opportunity to lead, because it is the place where every avenue of society converges and where you can make the most amount of change for the most number of people on all of those issues that matter. Because you're not going to have a safe world for Black transgender women if, yes, they might not be able to face explicit discrimination based on their gender identity, but if they still face a criminal justice system stacked against them, a lack of economic opportunity because of no one's willing to invest in them and empower them and support them. You're not going to have a safe world if we don't create change, both in our laws on all issues, but also in people's hearts.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm reminded of an old African proverb that I often share with my team, which is to go fast, you go alone, but to go far, you go together. And I think that there's a real space for government to affect real meaningful change, but to create lasting, enduring, meaningful change, I think it requires all of us, right? It requires government, the private sector, and individuals coming together to put forth a collective effort. So Sarah, thank you. I want to thank you for spending some time with us today and sharing so much of you and your story and your work. We appreciate your time and more broadly, your work to advocate for diverse communities across the country. So thank you, be well and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Likewise.